Now we're going to tie a fly that uses spun deer hair as the body. This one is going to be a Faced McDougal, but the same principle applies to a lot of flies that mostly are referred to by the Americans at least as irresistible patterns. That's standard dry flies with a spun deer hair body. And the first thing we do is going to tie in a tail. You will notice that I didn't take the thread all the way down the hook shank like we normally do. That's because it's going to make it a little bit easier to spin the deer hair on a bare hook shank. And for exactly the same reason, we don't need to have a nice smooth base of thread as normal, so we can use a short little bit of tail. These are brown cockhackle fibres. And you'll see I've deliberately overdressed this because the chances are you're going to catch some when you trim the deer hair and cut them out, so rather make it a bit more bulky and make sure that's nice and firm. There's one instance where actually making a half hitch isn't a bad idea, because we're going to be spinning deer hair on top of that in a second. Now we're going to take some deer hair. Don't try to use too much at once, particularly back here at the beginning or of tying the fly, because the hook gape is going to get in the way of the spinning if you're not careful. Take a small amount of deer hair, stroke out the under fur, and particularly on this first spinning section, just cut it the hair so you've got a nice short little bunch. Because as I said, we don't want it to get caught up by the hook shank, by the bend of the hook. Make 2 wraps of thread. Remember that little trick? Tap it to help it go around the hook. Wrap in the same place, wrap in the same place. And there's the first bunch of hair. We're now going to use our fingernails just to push it together nice and tight and bring the thread in front of the deer hair like that. Take another small bunch of deer hair. Stroke out the under fur. Cut off the tips. On top of the hook shank. Make 2 turns of thread. And again I'm going to tap it because I'm not completely off those base wraps of thread yet. There we go. And once more squash it tight. Bring the thread to the front. We add another bunch of deer hair. You can spin it using either the spinning method or the tapping method. I'm using quite thin thread, so it actually helps the initial distribution if I give it a little bit of a tap. And once more, squash those fibres together. We still want to leave some space at the front of the hook for the hackle. So I'm going to do a brief whip finish. You can use a half hitch for 2 if you want to, because the next step is to trim that body to shape. So there's the deer hair all spun on the hook, and now we're going to trim to the shape we want. The first thing I do on these flies is to trim the bottom as flat as I can get it. If you don't do that, you're going to spoil the gape of the hook, and you're going to have a fly that might be very effective but not very good at hooking fish. And then we're going to trim the rest of the body into a nice sort of bullet shape. Trimming deer hair, the most important thing is don't do it all at once. First of all, just trim it square across the top and on either side. A rough shape of what you want, like that. And then it's actually much easier to take it out of the vise to trim the rest of it to shape. So take the fly out of the vise, trim the back. Be very careful not to cut out all those tail fibres. You remember we cheated a bit and gave ourselves a few extra ones in case you make a mistake. Then keep trimming until you get the shape that you want. Once you've trimmed the body to shape, you reattach the thread to the front of the hook, take it up to the front of that body, and we're going to tie in a cock hackle. Just ginger cock hackle. It's one of the few flies where the quality of the hackle doesn't matter that much because the deer hair is providing flotation. Cock hackle in place, we're just going to tie in 2 grizzly hackle point wings and then wind the hackle. Got 2 grizzly hackle point wings. I'm going to tie them both in at the same time, 2 or 3 turns of thread, and they're way oversized at the moment, and I'm going to pull them both forward at the same time until they're the size I want, which is about there. Some fly tyers recommend that you split them with the thread. I don't ever find that's a problem. They seem to be quite happy to separate themselves with a bit of pushing around. Now we can trim those hackle point wings. We're ready to wind the hackle. Just neaten that up a little bit. I'm going to put a half hitch on here again just because there's a lot of material going on here and it's easy to knock the thread undone whilst we're doing that. We're going to wind the hackle. As you don't need a lot of hackle on this fly because, as I say, the deer hair is what's producing the flotation. Make 2 or 3 wraps behind the wings. Pull the wings into place. Take the hackle in front of the wings and make a couple more wraps. I'm just going to shorten the thread slightly and catch that hackle in there. There we go. Now we've caught the wings and the hackle in, we're just going to stroke the fibres out the way, make a finish in front of the hackle just behind the eye. And pull that tight. You can tidy it up a little bit. Take the odd hackle that's causing a bit of a problem there out the way. And if you want to, you can add a drop of varnish to the front of the hook. And there is the finished rat-faced McDougal. It's quite a pretty looking fly. It's exceptionally good on false water. Makes a good indicator fly if you're fishing a nymph in conjunction with it. Hackle point wings are nice and visible. And again, using the same technique, you can vary the colour schemes to imitate a variety of different things. It's not really a mayfly pattern, I suppose. It's a bit fat, but it works very well on false to water. It makes a very good generic pattern and a good beetle pattern as well.